In this video, we're going to talk about the Quick Select and Magic Wand tools. Now, these are both very nice selection tools to kind of automate the selection process based on a series of algorithms. We're going to start with the Quick Select tool, which is kind of like selecting with a paintbrush, but it's not really the same as painting selections. Painting selections is, in fact, the Quick Mask option, which we'll be talking about in an entirely separate video. Now, on the other hand, the Quick Select tool is kind of like dropping down a paint stroke and using that to define generally what it is you want to select and letting Photoshop handle it from there. That's probably the easiest way I can imagine to explain it. Now let's jump into our jellyfish JPEG. Now of course this is an image that is included with Windows 7 sample images, but you can use any picture that you like. It's just we have a nice contrast here between the color of the jellyfish's head and the color of the water around it, which should make this demo a whole lot easier for me, which is always nice. But check this out. If I have Quick Select active and I drag right across the jellyfish's head, take a look at what was selected. What Photoshop has done is it has taken a quick look at what it is I'm painting over, and it has used that with an algorithm to grab what it thinks I should be selecting. Now, by default, this has some options up at the top. We have New Selection, we have Add to Selection, and Subtract to Selection. Notice that Add is there by default. That's because Photoshop assumes that you're going to do this with multiple paintbrush strokes, and each time you click, you're going to be adding one more stroke, or I'm sorry, one more area to your selection, which is very, very cool. Now you can switch this to negative and you can take away. So if you didn't want the white areas, you're only trying to grab like the little spines, you can paint out these white areas. And Photoshop is pretty smart in being able to tell that you don't want that, and it starts to remove further and further away. And there's a trade-off. Now generally, I always leave this on Add, and I use the Alt key to remove things. So if I'm just painting and like, oh, well, I didn't want that, hold down the Alt key and that switches over to Subtract. Very, very cool tool. It's amazingly intelligent once you start using it. Now, moving down from here, you can control what brush you want to use, or what you want your brush to be shaped like, so you can control the size, the hardness, the spacing, and so forth. It's all pretty straightforward, but we're going to leave things pretty much the way they are, just for this example. We can choose to sample all of our layers, so basically that's choosing whether or not you want to grab the result of all of the stacked layers, like a composite of everything when you're making your selection. Very handy if you have a result that's made up of several different layers that you want to select from. And you have Auto Enhance. Now what Auto Enhance is going to do is use a newer algorithm to gauge the edge of your selection. Generally speaking, I always leave this on because I just find that I get slightly better results. It used to be a little bit of a performance thing, but these days I think they've cleaned up Photoshop so much, or it could be that I just have a really fast computer. But Auto Enhance just gives you a much nicer image. On an image like this, however, with such bright contrast, it's probably going to be a little hard to tell the difference. Next we have Refine Edge. Of course, that's going to take your current selection and allow you to perform a variety of changes to the edge, but we already covered that actually in a previous video over the lasso tool, so I'm not going to go over it again here. Now, underneath the Quick Select tool, we have the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool is very similar as I hit Control D to deselect. What Magic Wand is going to do is just allow you to click on an area, so you just do a single click, and then based on a tolerance value, it's going to grab all pixels that fall within that tonal range. And that's what the tolerance is going to do. It just allows you to set a tonal range, and it will grab all like pixels that fall within that tolerance. So for example, if I hit Control D to deselect and I set my tolerance to 0 and I click in my image, all I get is this one tiny little area, and that's because all the pixels in this area were pretty much identical. Now as I start to increase that, so let's hit Control D again, and we'll set my tolerance up to say 50. Now when I click, I get a much larger selection of pixels, and you can see where here in the lower left hand corner the changing color of the water just finally got too much, and so we ended up breaking away into a brand new selection. I can hold down the Shift key and I can grab this corner, I can keep holding down Shift and just keep adding to my current selection, and without spending all day clicking on all the little tiny blue areas, you see that very quickly I'm able to select a specific area of the image, such as the blue water around our little guy here, and then just for, I don't know, for the sake of demonstration, we could go drop on a solid color layer, and you can see how that's helped us out. So we were able to separate where his tendrils were and grab only the water area. So very cool. Now let's take a look at the options for the Magic Wand for just a second as I throw away this layer because it's in my way. So obviously you see what tolerance does. It just allows you to affect that tonal range. You can choose whether or not the edges will be anti-aliased. I think I would probably always leave this on. Contiguous is going to sample only contiguous pixels. If you switch this off, it's going to grab that same tone that falls within your tolerance across the entire image. If you leave this on, so that's what happens when it's off. It'll just grab everything across the entire image. If you switch this on and click, as soon as it hits that major tonal shift, it's going to be constrained within that area. So that's the important thing to keep in mind about contiguous. Next, you have sample all layers, which we only have one layer. But if your image was a result of several different stacked layers, then of course you might want to turn this on to help control your selection. And then finally, you can take a current selection and refine its edge. And we've already discussed that in a previous video, as I mentioned earlier. So that is a rundown of the Quick Select and Magic Wand tools. Both of them have their place. I refuse to say that one is superior to the other, especially in a case where, if you wanted to grab all of the water in this image, or as much of it as you could, as quickly as you could, you'd probably have an easier time grabbing just the Magic Wand tool, because just with 3 quick clicks, or maybe 4, we just grab the bulk of it right there. Now, for the little tiny areas, we might want to switch over and use Quick Select so that we could grab just these areas and start really controlling what is and isn't selected. But definitely 2 nice selection tools to add to your arsenal. That will, of course, wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.